Have you ever wondered about how the violent but widely loved swordplay of Japanese cinema came to be? Maybe not, but its origins can be traced back to the Japanese New Wave movement. After Japan's surrender in 1945, ending World War II, the country was thrust into political unrest and discontent over the restructuring of the government into a democracy, changes in the education system, economy, and almost every aspect of their life was disturbed. The Japanese film industry suffered tremendously as a result of unemployment and economic instability. The government used films as a source of propaganda and portrayed militarism ideals, which fueled the need for creative and fresh ideologies. Created in major studios to reflect this political and cultural change, the Japanese New Wave movement, or Nibiru Beigu in Japanese, was led by young unknown filmmakers such as Hiroshi Tashigahara and Yoshihisa Yoshida, who wanted to challenge traditional filmmaking techniques and were given the opportunity to save the nearly bankrupt major studios, such as Shoshiku and Toho. This sparked the commercial success of notable films within the movement, such as Woman in the Dunes, The Face of Another, and Euros plus Massacre. In The Face of Another, 1966, directed by Hiroshi Tashigahara, engineer Okuyama, played by Tatsuya Nakadai, severely burns his face in a work-related accident and is given a new one that slowly begins to alter his identity. Claustrophobic close shots and achingly long still shots depicting surrealist sequences contribute to the discomforting nature of the images shown on screen, as Tashigahara focuses on the themes of alienation and lost identity. Searching for identity was a pivotal theme within the films of this movement, as the Japanese people were actively building up a new culture after World War II, and the discomfort felt by audiences was common as they witnessed never-before-seen topics on the big screen. This loosely defined period of filmmaking ranged from the late 1950s to 1976, during which raw and expressive films took a transgressive turn in terms of touching upon traditionally taboo or alienated topics within the Japanese society through innovative cinematography, narrative, and editing. Topics of racism, sexual violence, homosexuality, social escapism, and rebellious lifestyles were prominent themes in these films that were so provocative and politically engaged. This term was first coined in the studios and media as the Japanese version of the French New Wave. This seemingly artificial movement quickly emerged to become a critical and increasingly independent period. Seen as the greatest achievement in Japanese New Wave, the 1969 film by Yoshihisa Yoshida, Euros plus Massacre, highlights themes of free love, anarchism, and the relationship between the past, present, and future. It perfectly exemplifies the exploration of unconventional topics that serve as a Japanese New Wave's defining characteristic, but also introduces yet another visual style, the avant-garde style, serving as the pinnacle film for representing the Japanese New Wave in its innovation and breaking away of societal constraints. Although there are many shared characteristics in this genre between the French New Wave movement, there are fundamental differences. Unlike the French New Wave that originated in the humble settings of everyday life, the films produced during this period were created by the major mainstream studios, so the roots of this movement took place within the mainstream context. Notable characteristics of the French New Wave movement was the improvisation of plot and dialogue, jump cuts rather than continuous editing, shooting on locations, handheld cameras, and the use of live recordings. It focused on new approaches to editing, visual style, and narrative, as well as engagement with the social and political contexts of France at the time. Almost all of these characteristics translated in post-war Japan, who was experiencing new bursts of culture and exposure to the works of international filmmakers such as those of the French New Wave. Unlike the French New Wave, stylistic choices were not at the core of the Japanese New Wave. Instead, narrative and theme-based movements governed these films, which explains some of the rough and realistic scenes present. So why does this matter? This soaring and prosperous movement came to an end in the 1970s, when major filmmakers such as Tashigahara and Yoshida transitioned to other artistic pursuits, leading to the scarcity of films that ultimately signified the end of this era. The Japanese New Wave movement is one of the most significant film movements in the history of Japanese cinema, as it completely changed the way people viewed taboo subjects such as homosexuality and sexual violence. This period catalyzed the innovation and unconventionality so popular and loved in Japanese cinema today, and multitudes of films from across the world have adopted similar styles and tropes of this movement.